remember the person that taught at CMDI. I know I taught it for a while. Anyway, we're on page number 20, where you are, page number 20. Now we're studying about the creation of man. Last week we studied the difference between Lucifer, which was a high created being, wasn't he? The highest creation of God so far before God created man. God almost duplicated himself when he, in power and authority, when he created Lucifer. And Lucifer, what happened to him? With every creation, with every bit of God's creation, in that creation, for God to be glorified and for God to be worshipped, that creation must have a volition, a will. It could either choose to do so or not. That's very important. When God created man, he created him in what? In his own image. In God's reflection, God created man. So now, man has been the highest creation that God has ever made. Higher than the angels. Higher, because who will judge angels in the end? All right? The Lord's people. All right. Now before we go on any further, we're going to get down there on number 5 where it says, and I'm going to read that to you. Number 5, the blank is Eden, which means God's delight. All right? Eden, which means, now you're going to have to write in Eden and you're going to have to write in God's delight, is the earth and eastward in the earth, and God planted a garden. And the word garden actually even means paradise. And what does paradise mean? It's an old word. Paradise comes all the way from Persian. Okay? It comes from Persian and it means a guarded pleasure park. That's what it means. It came into Hebrew and it also means paradise. All right? And in Hebrew, the word paradise means guarded pleasure park. And then it came into Greek, which is paradiso. All right? Now, what does it mean? In none of those languages was it ever really translated. It was just transferred, transliterated from one language to the other. In other words, the word was brought down. Then it came into English from paradiso, which means what? Come on, you guys. What is it in English? Paradise. It's just transliterated. But paradise means guarded pleasure park. Guarded pleasure park. So number 5 is Eden, which means God's delight, is the earth, and eastward in the earth, God planted a garden or a paradise. Okay? A garden or a paradise. Now let's look at some contrasts. If you wanted to title our lesson today, it would be contrasts. Contrast. Contrast between Genesis, the book of beginnings, and Revelation, the book of... What is Revelation? What does it mean? Apocalypse. What is it? Apocalypse. What is apocalypse? Apo and what? Calypsis. To uncover, revealing. The book of Revelation is a book of revealing. Okay? We're on page number 20. And we're studying about contrast between the book of Revelation and the book of Genesis. Now, we already studied, to some extent, how that God took woman from man, didn't we? We have God creating man, Adam, in his image, and then later on he was called Ish, or mankind, and then woman is. By the way, what was Eve's first given name? Just think about it. What was Eve's first given name? Adam changed her name, didn't he?
Hey.
Huh?
That was her first name. Hey.
Hey.
Adam called her. Hey, Eve.
Hey. Well, what was Eve's first given name? Woman. Isha. Or woman. That was her name, woman. Because Adam named her. He named everything. And when God brought her unto him, he says, look at there. That's bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, and blood of my blood. So I will call her out of man, woman, Isha. That was her first name. Then after man sinned, and woman had a lot to do with it. Okay. After man sinned, mankind, Adam gave her another name. And that other name is called Hava. All right? Or Eve in English. Eve. All right, Eve. Now what does Eve mean? This is very unusual. We're going to get into it a little bit more, but what does Eve mean?
Mother of all mankind.
Living. Mother of all living. Now, God had just told them, God had just told Adam and Eve that every one of their children and they would die, did he? And then all of a sudden Adam says, she's the mother of all living.
The living dying.
Well, because she was going to be the mother of the Messiah. She would be the mother of the living one, the Messiah. So what did he do? That was a step of faith on his part. He believed God was going to provide a Messiah for him. Let's go in. Go back and look at the contrast between Genesis and Revelation again. Now, every time that how many of you heard me teach the book of Genesis through Revelation? How many times? 3 times? I've taught it, I think, 4 times in this church since I've been here. But I've taught it over and over again. We'll take off on one study and then another. We did God's eternal purpose. We did, can't even remember. Old Testament, New Testament survey. We did,
Revelation.
well, we did Revelation also. But we've studied quite a few times in the Bible in 8 ages, but we've studied all the way through the book, the Bible, several times. Even in the doctrines of the Bible, the book that I wrote, we went from Genesis through Revelation in it too. And I taught that class 3 times here. I taught it the first time and they said, do it again. Remember that? Some of you? And I taught it again. They said, do it one more time. I said, man, I'm getting tired of teaching this. The same thing over and over again, year after year. Randy, you heard it 2 or 3 times, didn't you? Yeah. He's been here in my class for at least 6 years, 7 years maybe. Way back in 2000, 2001. I've got videos of you. I know you were there. And Brother Lee. Huh?
You have the evidence?
Yes, I've got the evidence, brother. Way back then, and Brother John, you go way back too, 5, 6 years. All right. But we've taught through these things many times, but I try to give you something extra every time. Remember, there is a time element in learning. Don't forget that. Something I threw at you 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, you might understand now better. Or else it just all of a sudden says, oh, I have seen my class, I have seen my students sit in the class for 3 or 4 years, and when I come on a subject or on a certain thought or biblical foundational truth, they'll say, ah, I got it. You know what? That is thrilling to me. It is thrilling when I see them say, I got it. I understand now. I understand. Remember that with Brother Bill 2 or 3 times, Brother Bill.
Said more than that.
In the book of Genesis, we see, in the book of Genesis, we see God creating woman from the sides of Adam. In the New Testament, and in the finality of it, in the book of Revelation, we see Jesus creating his bride out of his pierced side and his wounded back. Out of his flesh, too. By his flesh and his blood, where is the bride bought by? Do you see that? Do you see the beauty of that? We see, coming from Adam's side, we see Isha, or woman, or Eve. And then through the promise, we see the Savior come, and from his wounded sides, we see the bride bought. And in the book of Revelation, we see his bride presented to him as a virgin in white clothing. And where did the white clothing come from? From his wounded side. All right. So we see that. We see the beginning in Genesis, and we see the fulfillment in Revelation. The book of Revelation is kind of the book of the culmination of salvation in mankind. In the book of Genesis, we see death begin. We see a beautiful creation. We see the destruction of a creation, don't we? We see the destruction of it. It says, Barashith bara. It says, in beginnings created Elohim. Et hashemayim ve'et haaretz. We see him creating the heavens and the earth. And then Genesis 1 and 2, it says, we haaretz, and the earth. We is and, haaretz is the earth. And the earth, haya, tuhu wabohu. And the earth, she became formless and void. She became ruined. Totally useless. A chaos and a turmoil. And we see that. And then we see Spirit God. We see Ruah Elohim, Spirit God. We see him brooding over the faces of the abyss, or the deep. And then we see Spirit God bringing things back into order. And we see man created in the image of God. And was God surprised when Adam sinned?
No.
God he has a triune attributes. He has triune attributes. What are they? He's all-knowing, what we call omniscient. He's omnipresent, and what?
Powerful.
Omnipotent or omnipowerful. Now, if God isn't that, he's not God. As simple as that. Are you guys getting a little cold?
Yeah.
Are you? Can you turn that thing down just a little bit? Just down a notch? Well, in the book of Genesis, we see death. We see death of animals. We see the death of the first man. You know, the first thing that ever died, as far as I can tell, in the garden was a man. And he was killed by his brother. And just think about that for a while. God promised in Genesis 3:15, God promised a redeemer to the woman, didn't he? Through the seed of the woman. Now, what was the first child, as far as we know? What was the first child from the matrix of the woman?
Cain.
What? Cain. Now, look again and remember again. I want to re-emphasize this so much. Eve, the mother of living, all right, that was her name, the mother of all living, and she was named that because she was going to bring forth the Redeemer. When she had the first child, he was a male child, and she said, "Look, we have gotten the man, even the Lord, the Messiah. We've gotten the Messiah." And then she had other children. And this child was the heir. He was the wheels. He was the heir of all things. This is Cain, gotten. That's what his name means. And then when Cain went the wrong way, didn't he? Cain was a type of his mother and father. Did you know that? As mother and fathers, if we go the wrong way, the children are sure to follow. Aren't they? If we go the wrong way, the children are sure to make those same mistakes. They follow. Children imitate. So in this world, you want to do what? You want to be the good imitator for your children, don't you? You want to be the good example. Well, Cain was an example of how that his mother and her father rebelled against God. And he was the promised child, they thought. God had to replace him after he killed Abel. God had to replace him. And he replaced him, the faith line was Zeth. All right? And Zeth means what? Substitute. Now in the Old Testament, we see a promise of a Redeemer in the book of Genesis. We see death reigning on mankind and the animal kingdom. After Cain killed his brother, then there had to be another death, didn't there? Huh? Well, there was other deaths.
Sacrifice.
Huh?
That'd be a sacrifice.
Had to be a sacrifice. Sacrifices. Sacrifices had to be made. Over and over and over and over again, sacrifices had to be made. On that altar where that Cain knew about, by the way. He knew about because God had made the first sacrifice. The first human death took place in that garden. It was not natural death. It was a murder. A murder. Well, in the New Testament, in the book of Revelation, we see all death erased, don't we? All death is erased, and salvation is culminated in the Savior, Jesus Christ. And then it says that he will rule forever. Now, Adam was to rule over the earth, and he flopped, didn't he? But the second Adam, the Messiah, he will rule over the heavens and the earth. Look at this. Forever and ever. Look at another contrast in Genesis. Genesis, we have a cursed earth. In Genesis, we have a cursed earth. And then look up Revelation 20 and verse 11, and 21 through 20 and verse 2. All right? Revelation 20 and verse 11 through 21 and verse 2. Let's look at that. In Genesis, we have a cursed earth. It's cursed. How many of you stepped on a sticker or got poked by a foxtail or a, what's those other little weird looking things that get all over everything? Sandburrs this last week. You get them. The thorns and thistles shall the earth bring forth. How many of you ever had poison ivy? Got on you? Poison oak? That's from a cursed earth. Now in Revelation, we see the earth cursed in the book of Genesis, but in Revelation 20 and verse 11, someone read that for me. Brother Randall, have you got that?
Then I saw a great white throne, and him who sat upon it, from whose presence the earth and heaven fled away, and no place was found for them.
Just keep on going.
And I saw the dead, the great and the small, standing before the throne, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life, and the dead were judged from the things which were written in the books, according to their deeds. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and Hades.
Now hold on right here just for a moment. In the book of Genesis, we see people going into the bodies going to the ground. Don't we? We see death. We see how many people have been died and been buried. How many animals have died and been buried? All the way, look at all the death that has reigned from the book of Genesis till now. Look at all the death. And has anybody ever lived? Only two that didn't see death. That's Enoch and Elijah. Only two have not died in all the history of mankind. And then here we see the Anastasia. The Anastasia. The resurrection. We see the resurrection. We see death, and in the book of Revelation we see the contrast, which is the revelation, which is the resurrection. Now I'm going to tell you something that you need to understand, that all mankind will be resurrected. All of them. Dead people, double dead people. That's the ones that don't have Christ. And those that have Christ, all of them's going to be resurrected. Did you know that? There aren't going to be any non-resurrected people. But God's people will be resurrected unto everlasting life, and the other ones are going to be resurrected to be thrown into the lake of fire. And they will live in their resurrected bodies forever like that. With all the pains of the things they had in life. Now, those in resurrected bodies like Christ, they will live in a pain-free, sorrow-free, resurrected body forever. In the book of Revelation, we see death reigning. In the book of Genesis, we see death reigning, and we see a cursed earth. And in the New Testament, in the book of Revelation, we see eternal life reigning, and we see a living earth again. Our earth that's going to bring forth purity. Now go on, Brother Randall.
And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead which were in them, and they were judged, every one of them, according to their deeds. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire, which is the second death, and the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire.
All right. That's good enough for right now. Well, just do verse 1. Is that you're at 21 and verse 1?
21.
Okay, go ahead and read that.
Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and there is no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready as a bride adorned for her husband.
All right. Now, in the book of Genesis, we see the beginning of Scotia. Remember what Scotia is, all you Greek students? Remember what Scotia is, Brother Blanton? You know what Scotia? Sophon, Scotia. Scotia is darkness.
Okay.
The book of Jude calls it Sophon, Scotia, thick darkness. Peter also calls it that thick pea soup darkness. In the book of Genesis, in Genesis 1 and 2, and it says, darkness became over the faces of the deep. Now, in the eternal ages before, the universe was lighted by the presence of God. God was light. All right? And then God made lights in the heavens after He restored the earth. But in the book of Revelation, we don't see darkness. In the 3rd chapter of the Gospel of John, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. But the world loves darkness rather than light because its deeds are what?
Evil.
Evil. And so they choose darkness rather than light. The Pharisees always said they were the enlightened ones. They were the leaders. They were the elite of the elite. Pharisee comes from the word phares. In the Old Testament, it says, many, many tekel upharsin. Remember that in the book of Revelation there? That's what Daniel saw written on the wall. Upharsin means separated or taken away from. All right? Separated or taken away from. In the New Testament, the Pharisees called them themselves the separated ones. They were higher and holier and better and more enlightened than all of the rest. But Jesus said to them, you live in darkness. In John the 3rd chapter, who is He talking to? Remember. Who's speaking? Who's He speaking to? What is the subject? He is talking to Nicodemus as a representative of the Sanhedrin and the Pharisaical culture of his time. He was a representative. When Nicodemus came to Jesus, he said, we, first person plural. Now you grammarian students on Wednesday night here, first person plural is more than one. It's not I. He didn't say, I know that you're a teacher come from God, but we, as part of the Sanhedrin court. How many Pharisees were on the Sanhedrin court?
40.
23. Yeah. Remember all the Sanhedrin court? 23 scribes, 23 Pharisees, 23 Levites, and one high priest, wasn't it? Something like that. All on there. The 70. That's what the Sanhedrin was made up of, 70 people. The 70 elders of Israel. And Nicodemus was representing all of them right there when he came before Jesus. By night, he came there. He came there as a representative, and Jesus would switch the person of the verbs. He said, yeah, you all are rats, all right, but I'm telling you, Nicodemus, you must be born again. You must be born again. And Nicodemus knew what it was to be born again because he had been teaching proselytes all the time. And when a proselyte wanted to become a part of national Israel and a part of the promise of God and a part of the promise of Abraham, he had to go before the local synagogue, wherever he was, and he had to make his profession of faith, and he had to be baptized, dipped. They shaved him all over his body like he would be a brand new born child. That's the way most babies are born, you know, white babies anyway. But Indians, we got hair when we're born, you know. We don't have that curse. But they would dip them, and they would die to their old nationality, and they would be raised anew unto their new nationality, which was national Israel. They would die, and the Jews call that being born again. So Nicodemus, Jesus did not use a new term. Culmination, born from above, born again. First time they're born with death. The second time they're born with life. Okay. Now in Genesis we see darkness ruling from Genesis to the book of Revelation. Darkness. In the 6th chapter of the book of Ephesians, it talks about the rulers of darkness, doesn't it? And the powers of darkness. And we talked about that last week. Remember when we talked about Lucifer? He is the ruler of darkness, isn't he? He is the power. He is the power head over this satanic cosmos. The satanic world system. In Revelation 22 and verse 5. Randall, are you still over there? Revelation 22 and verse 5.
22:5?
Yeah, 22 and verse 5. Let's look at that. In the book of Genesis, we see darkness becoming. And in the book of Revelation, in contrast, in 22 and verse 5, what do we have there, brother?
And there will no longer be any night, and they will not have need of the light of a lamp nor the light of the sun, because the Lord God will illumine them, and they will reign forever and ever.
All right. Now the Lord God of heaven, Jehovah Elohim, by the way, Brother Lee he came over to my house the other day, and he asked me, he said, this real famous preacher says in the New Testament there is no reference to the word Jehovah. I beg to differ with that man. Every time you see the Lord God used in the New Testament, all right, Kyrios, Theos, every time you see the word Lord God, it is the equivalent of Jehovah Elohim in the Old Testament. And tonight, this afternoon, we're going to get into the Jehovah titles in the book. At 4:30, I'm teaching a class on Jehovah Witness doctrine, and we're going to see the Jehovah titles fulfilled in the person of Jesus Christ. And in the book of James and in Peter and several places in the book of Hebrews, it talks about Jesus as the Lord Sabaoth. Now, what is that? In the Old Testament, it was Jehovah Sabaoth. All right? And in the Old Testament, we see in the book of Genesis, Jehovah Jireh. The Lord is there. And in the New Testament, right here, we see that the Lord is there. That's Jehovah Jireh. The Lord provided and the Lord was seen right there. That's beautiful. All right? And He's the Lord of armies also. Jehovah Sabaoth. That's who Jesus is. So many times in the New Testament, yes, the title of Jehovah is referred to all over in every book in the New Testament. Any time that they call Jesus Kyrios, in the Old Testament, the Septuagint translation of the word Jehovah was Kyrios. It could be master teacher. It could be Mr. in profane Greek writing. Throwing a little bit of that in there. They call people Kyrios today. Kyrie, actually, would be a vocative. Kyrie, Mr. or Sir. But they could also mean Jehovah, because that is the title. That is the equivalent, Kyrios. All right. Abraham in Genesis is seeking what? What was Abraham seeking all of his life? What was Abraham seeking all of his life?
Seeking is looking for that city not made with hands.
He looked for that city not made with hands, whose builder and foundation layer was who?
God.
God. All right. Revelation 21 and verse 2. Again, Revelation 21 verse 2. Do you have that, Sister Blanton, there? Revelation 20. Who's got Revelation 21 and verse 2? Michelle.
And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready as a bride adorned for her husband.
All right. This New Jerusalem, who made it?
God.
God did. Isn't that beautiful? Now Jesus said in John the 14th chapter, he says, what? Fear not. Don't be afraid. Where I'm going, you may come also. He also told me, he said, I go away, and what is he going to do while he's gone? I'm going to make many dwelling places for you, many mansions for you. I'm going to tell you something. How many of you ever looked at, thought about that city, New Jerusalem? How big is that city?
Big enough.
It's big enough, that's right, brother. But how big is that city?
It's 1,500 miles, 4 square.
1,500 miles square.
4 square.
All right, now just think about 15. Now think about all the saved people that have been saved in all of the history of the human race. All right? All the babies that were dead at birth, all the children that have been aborted. And I remember Brother Blanton's pastor, his first pastor, D.S. Madden. He got up from the class one time, he's teaching. He said, I don't think that the devil's going to outdo God in any way. I want you to know something, he said. Every time a child is aborted in some foreign land, every time some child's been killed somewhere, every time over there in the darkness of Africa or in South America or any place else, wherever a child dies before the age of accountability, he's going to be with God. And there's going to be a whole lot more saved people than there are lost people, because there's a lot of babies that die. The mortality rate in most of the world today is still great. And every one of them babies is going to be with God. Thank God for that. For the blood of Jesus Christ that covers all of these. Well, that's the contrast between Revelation and Genesis, and Genesis and Revelation. Do you ever have you thought of that before? Maybe you have. I just wanted to bring that thought in there to you. Do you have any questions? To me, I was thinking about that this last week, and I wrote these thoughts down, and I wanted to share them with you. I want to share this with you. All right, number 6 on page number 20. Number 6 on page number 20. We talked about Eden, which means God's delight. Now write this at number 5. Delight is the earth, and eastward in the earth God planted a garden or a paradise. And what does the word paradise, paradiso, mean? Guarded pleasure park. Name the 4 kinds of trees growing in the garden. All right? All of you that went back there, A, B, C, and D.
Big tree?
What?
Big
4
tree.
kinds of trees.
Apple.
No fig.
Definitely an apple.
Kinds of trees.
Okay.
All right? 4 kinds. Beautiful and ornamental trees. There were some beautiful trees. How many of you got beautiful trees in your yard?
Ornamental.
Or down the road from you or whatever. There are ornamental trees, beautiful trees. And number B, there are fruit-bearing trees. Okay? Fruit-bearing tree. What is a fruit-bearing tree? How many of you have a fruit-bearing tree in your yard? All right? That's a fruit tree. That's something you can eat off the tree. All right? Nuts. There's nut trees. There's apple trees. What else?
Peasel tree.
Olive trees.
You ever seen a peasel tree?
A peasel tree. Tell us about it, brother.
Well, that's the psalmist wrote about the peaceful tree.
Yeah.
P-S-A-L-T-R-Y.
Yeah.
Peaceful tree.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard that sermon on the peaceful tree?
I heard it a long time ago, brother, but I don't remember it. I remember that, I can't think of his name right now, the one that actually helped found this church originally.
Mike.
What?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. And I can't
Doug Pointer.
remember this.
Doug Pointer, he preached on the peaceful tree, but I can't remember about it. I remember, and he preached on lettuce, his lettuce garden.
Yeah,
Yeah. Remember that, brother?
yeah.
Yeah. He preached these, he built a lot of churches, almost every church in San Joaquin Valley. Well, fruit trees. Fruit trees have oranges on them, they have apples on them, they have plums, they have apricots, they have nuts, almonds, they have pecans, walnuts, all kinds of nut and fruit trees. All right? And that's what was in the garden. What a nice, and there was no curse yet. And these things just prolifically produced. What else was in there?
Good
What else
people.
tree? What the tree of the knowledge of good and evil?
Good people.
Fig tree.
Somebody's gonna keep on planting a fig tree.
Yeah, he's keep on working on these fig trees. We got one of them too. I've got almost every kind of biblical fruit out there on that farm. Pomegranates and figs and almonds and all kinds of them anyway.
Pomegranates right now.
Their pomegranates are right. If you want some, come get them. All right. And then we have number D, the tree of Zoe. Life. Spiritual life. There's a word for in Greek for physical life, which is bios. Bios, we get our word biology from. But there's also a word for spiritual life, that is the word zoe. We get the word zoology from that also. All right. There we are. Now go, is your start on the next page, or are you still on the same page? What page are you on now? I turned page.
20.
You're still on page 20. All right. Number 7, is that on page 20?
Yes.
Okay. Number 7, name 3 of the things which grew in the Garden of Eden.
Figs.
Who is that? Where is that guy?
He
You
showed
knew
up.
he was going to say that.
It was Brett, but I had to say it.
I knew Brett was here.
Brett, would you like a fig today?
I would.
You come out there and pick you some figs.
Because they always say the apple tree is.
We got apples too. And oranges, and tangerines, and all another thing. Plums, and prune. We have a prune tree.
Well, they must have had a date
How about a
palm.
persimmon?
Yeah, well, we got a date palm also. A date palm tree. Well, they had all of these things there. But number A now, let's get back to this here question. Name 3 other things which grew in the Garden of Eden.
Grass.
What do you spice your food with?
Herbs.
Herbs. All right, herbs. You drop the H. It's a silent herbs. Not herbs, but herbs. Okay? Herb is a guy, you know. Herbert. And then we have shrubs. Herbs, shrubs, and grass. Now grass, you know, is quite a thing. You know, God did. I think about this for a while. How many of you had milk or dairy products this morning? You know, cow can go out there and eat that green grass, and then out comes this beautiful white milk. It comes that way. And this morning, whatever you had for breakfast gives you energy enough to keep going today, doesn't it? Just think about that. Whatever you got turns into energy. Did you get anything this morning, Brother Bill?
Yeah, you know, when you said that, Jim, what my thought comes to my mind is, who was the first guy that when he seen a cow eating grass thought, I'll squeeze them little things and drink whatever comes out? You know, I wonder...
His name was Adam.
I kept wondering who...
That's what we call the domesticated cattle in the book of Genesis. Domesticated cattle. As a matter of fact, you know what Abraham, now I had this when I was over there in Syria with Brother Madden. We were in this hotel called the Palace, the Oriental Palace. I got to tell you this story. This is really funny. I walked in there in this room. They gave us this room. We had to go up the stairs because the elevator was all busted up. Dirt was all over the floor, everything else. We walk into this room in the Oriental Palace in Damascus, Syria, right on the street corner. We go in there, and Brother Madden goes over and he hits that bed like that and dust just flies. He said, boy, it's a clean room. Goes like that on the floor and the dust is flying all over the floor like this. He said, boy, he said, don't breathe, don't touch none of this stuff. he said, get your hand cleaner out here or something before you do anything. Boy, what a mess. Boy, it was a grisly mess in that room. We went in there in the bathroom and the water was... These are a backward people. He said that's the most backward place he'd ever been in the world. It was the most backward place I ever was in the world. It's Damascus, Syria. I went in there in the bathroom, and there was a floor in there. It was a beautiful tile floor. We couldn't see it for the dirt. I had brought some Comet with me, and I got down there and started cleaning the floor path between the toilet seat and the sink and everything. And I cleaned the pathway to where I could walk. He said, don't you walk on that stuff barefoot. Boy, this was filthy. Filthy. Anyway, I ended up getting really sick on that stuff. But the faucets ran all the time. They didn't shut them off. They didn't know how to fix the faucets. They just hot water just run in the sink in there. And in the bathtub in there was a 3/4 inch pipe going up there with a sprinkler head on it. That was a shower.
Sprinkler head.
Sprinkler head. Sprinkler head, like you'd spray your yard with. No shower curtain. No, this is the Oriental Palace now.
Hook up a hose to your shower. Sprinkler head.
Boy. The Oriental Palace. We went down there in the restaurant, and I looked out there on the table, and there was a bowl out there. This is what you call a salt well. Is that what you call those things?
Cellar.
Salt cellar. Salt cellar was out there, but you know what? They forgot to take the dirt out of it. You had to separate the dirt from the salt. And the cats were running around in there all over the place. And we were getting ready to eat. This was our final dinner. We've been there for a week. Why we stayed in that place a week, I don't know why we stayed in that place for a week. I don't know why. Anyway, we go there and this guy brought out this food. And this was the food that Abraham fed the angels. There was some young lamb. There was some roasted lamb. And when they would cook their food, they didn't have stoves like we did. They had a big container of diesel, and they turned the diesel on, and it ran down on a bunch of rocks, and they lit the diesel. And this is what the place smelled like all through that city. The eyes of this. Oh, it's terrible. I went on the street, called straight into the big place where the big everything in there. But anyway, here they came out with this food. And they had this roasted kid that tasted like diesel. And they had this rice, which was okay by itself. And they gave you a stack of plates. You didn't let any other food touch the other food. Muhammad didn't eat it like that. If they had 5 plates sitting down in front of you, that's how many courses you were going to get. So they put this first stuff on there. And they bring this in, and then they have this camel yogurt gravy. Yogurt gravy.
Yeah, yeah.
Camel yogurt gravy. That's what the curds. You know, it says in King James curds. This is camel yogurt gravy. And Brother Madden's sitting there at the table with me, and he gets over there like this, and there's cats running around here and there and everything else. And, you know, we're over here in a foreign country. These people hate us already. They got 3 people hanging out there. I went down the road in a bus, and they got 3 people hanging by the neck from a yard arm. They didn't let them hang there until they rotted it. This is a bad place. Brother Madden, he said, that stuff isn't fit to eat. He took it, he put it on the floor and said, come here, kitty, kitty, kitty.
Can't take it out. Can't take it out.
That cat was hungry.
Can't take it out and bury it.
That cat was hungry. Well, I sat there and I tried to eat the stuff. I said, I don't want to offend these people. I said, I don't care. He said, they might kill me, they ain't going to eat me. Boy, I'll never forget that. That camel yogurt. Yeah, they had milk back then. This camel yogurt gravy over with this. He said, they ruined that. We thought we'd go get some rice. We had some white-looking rice. Of course, they had dirt in it. Everything had dirt in it. I was afraid to drink a glass of water over there. I did drink one glass of coffee, just to say I did it, with hair in it.
Oh.
Oh, I tell you. And you could literally, have you ever heard where you could stand the spoon up in it? I'm telling you, you could stand the spoon up in that coffee, and it really stood up there by itself. It was a little old thing, looked like go to a Chinese restaurant, they give you one of these little cups, so that's why kind of this Turkish coffee they had. And they give it to you, except that there was only that much liquid on top, and the rest of it was solid down in the bottom. And you could take a spoon and put it right in there, and it'd stand right up there.
Did it wake you up?
I'll tell you what, my heart went it's like that when I drank that stuff. I just drank it to say I had one of them, but I was sorry after I did it. Boy, I tell you what, I got sick. By the time I got into Jordan, I was sick. Yeah, they have all the way back there, they were milking.
I just couldn't figure out who thought of it.
All the way back there, in the book of Genesis, they were milking camels, they were milking goats, they were milking sheep, and they were milking cows. These were all domesticated cows. Now, I don't think they had any Holstein cattle back then because they bred them up later, okay? But they had it. They used all these, and they even milked horses. When I was a young boy, if you had whooping cough, they went out and milked a mare and gave you that mare's milk, and that got rid of the whooping cough, they said. These are the old stories. By the way, when I was growing up, they said you can't eat fish and drink milk at the same time, it'll kill you. That's what they told me.
You think it's because of the bacteria? Because they didn't have a good bacteria enough yet?
That was their idea. Okay, that was one of the old wives' tales. All right, I thought I'd just share those few little things. Did they ever tell you that, brother Blanton?
No, I would have left before he finished.
All right, number 8. Number 8. We're almost at the end of the story. What does the Hebrew say about the creation of the first woman? All right, now let's get this. Now, what does the Hebrew say? We're not talking about the King's Bible or any of them other ones that followed after it. But what does the Hebrew say about the creation of the first Isha? And what was Eve's first name? Woman. That was her name before she was called Eve. What does the Hebrew say about the creation of the first woman? Tony, what do you have down there?
Oh, I don't have anything.
Oh, you don't have it? You don't. What do you know that's down there? How about you, Hernando? Nothing?
I have
I can read it in my
Yashin,
Bible.
All right.
Yashin, Y-A-S-H-E-N. I got it from the Bible and
Okay. Well, what happened
That's
here?
what I got it in the Bible.
But easier.
All right. That God took from Adam's size and clothed the flesh instead of her. That God took from Adam's sides, or Ish's sides, and clothed the flesh instead of her. Remember last week we talked a little bit, last week or the week before, we talked a little about the creation of woman and the creation of marriage. Yeah, marriage. We say that God took from Adam's side and clothed the flesh instead of her. So that's what's supposed to be down there. That God took from Adam's sides and closed up the flesh instead of her. Period. Now, did Adam have a belly button?
Sounds like you had a whole lot more than the belly button.
Yeah.
no.
I don't know. All right. Number 9. Number 9. All right, number 9. Did you learn something today? Number 9. What duties did the first man and woman have in the Garden of Eden? What does the word garden mean? The paradise of God. It's the guarded pleasure park. That's where they live. The guarded pleasure park. Who was supposed to be guarding the garden? Who was guarding? All right? All right. They're supposed to dress the garden and care for it. They're supposed to reproduce and fill the earth with their offspring, and they're not to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They're supposed to dress and guard the garden. to dress and guard the garden. Okay, that's number one. Number two is reproduce. That means have children and fill the earth with their offspring. And number three is don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But they could eat of the tree of life, couldn't they, at that time? All right. Now that's where we're going to finish. Do you have any questions? Have any questions? Come on, you got to have some. How about comments?
You got any answers?
No.
We don't have questions.
I don't have an answer until you ask it. Ask the question. All right.
One thing we know that was already present in the creation was Lucifer, the devil.
That's right.
Therefore, the knowledge of the tree of good and evil.
Uh-huh.
One thing you had present was God.
Yep.
And that's the tree of life.
Yep.
So God is like saying to them, choose you this day who you will serve,
That's right.
me or him.
Number 10. Man is not a robot, but is a free moral being. Man is not a robot, but he's a free moral being with the power of what? Choice. And this places a great responsibility upon man, the most grave responsibility that was ever placed upon man. Now, on number 10, what page are you on? 21. You're on page 21. Now, the next one is chapter number 8, the temptation and fall, and that's where we're going to start from next week. All right, no other questions or comments. Then I'm going to turn you loose on the world. I want you to go out and do something eternal this week. All right. Let's have a word of prayer, and we will go turn you loose on the world. Brother Blanton, would you dismiss us in prayer, please, brother? What? Oh, I'm sorry. Brother, you come right up here. I took his job. I thought I was on Sunday night or Wednesday night. I apologize to you, brother.
No, you didn't get your song.
Thank you, Bill. There's where I am, boy. I messed up.
You didn't get your song to start.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, we have some prayer and praises here. My wife and I would like to thank everybody for praying for her dad. He passed away on Thursday, but he was saved about a week and a half ago.
Amen.